Well, it's great to be here with you today, and it's great to be here to talk about the future of the country and to be looking out at all of you who represent the future of the country. You know, I was elected as the youngest senator in America, and all I can say is I hope to be able to serve long enough to see the beginning of the 21st century. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. It's been 19 years since the 20th century ended. 19 years. Is it too much to ask that the 21st century actually be allowed to begin? Because our politics and our rhetoric and too much of what goes on in this town and on Capitol Hill, I mean, my goodness, you could close your eyes and you may as well be in the 1970s or the 1980s. The political establishments of both parties have become so ossified, it's like we're trapped in amber. And meanwhile, the needs of the country have gone forward. And if the 2016 election was about anything, it was about the American people saying the political establishments have failed, the old politics is failed, it is time for something new. And that's what we're here for. And here's the problem. While the political class here has been rehearsing and rehashing the same old debates with the same old rhetoric from decades past, before you were born, heck, before I was born. Well, that's been happening. The political class has drifted into a consensus with other elements of the leadership class across this country, a consensus that has too often let down the people who sent me here, to have let down the people who built this country, let down the people who defend America. I call them the great American middle, the great middle of our society. The people who wake up every day, go to work hard all day, come home to their family, read to their kids at night, thankful for their blessings. The kind of people who donate out of their gas money every month to help needy families who live half a world away, people that they'll never meet. The kind of people who I suspect you know, in the kind of places where you grew up. These are the kind of people who for too long have been neglected and overlooked and whose interests have not been spoken for in this town or in our politics. You know, our political class has drifted into a consensus that has several principles that I bet you'll recognize, because I know that it's the conventional wisdom on most of our college campuses today. This sort of reigning consensus, the conventional wisdom of the leadership elite in this country, tells us that things like patriotism are dangerous. Too much emphasis on patriotism and nationalism and the good things about America, that's narrow-minded, that could even be bigoted, that it's too narrow of a focus. The same consensus says that we need to pursue and embrace economic globalization and economic integration at all costs, open markets, open borders, open trade, open everything, no matter whether it's actually good for American national security or for American families or for American workers or for American principles. These are the same people who have told us that we need to have open immigration at whatever levels, so that we can have more labor in the country that unfortunately drives down prices, drives down wages, that is, for working Americans. These are the same people who want you on your college campuses to make sure that you don't say anything that offends anybody, for heaven's sake, who say that we can't use trigger words, that we need to use trigger warnings, whatever that means. This is the elite consensus that has governed our politics now for too long, and what it has produced is a politics of elite ambition. You know, here's what our leaders have said to the country and what they have said to middle America for too long now. They've said that if you want to go and start a tech company in Silicon Valley, then we're all for you. If you want to become elite like us, go to an elite university, go to an elite graduate school and embrace our elite point of view in the world, if you want to put career achievement over community, if you think that change is more important than tradition, if you are skeptical of things like faith and family, that's great. If that's the view that you hold, then we're for you, and our politics will help you get there. It'll help you succeed. But what if your ambition is not to start a tech company? What if your ambition is to work in the family business? What if your ambition is to raise a family in the town where you grew up? What if your ambition is to create something that you can pass on to your kids? What if one of your most prized values is your love of this country and belief that we are a good and decent people whose heritage is worth celebrating? What if that's you? Well, if it is, then this town and the leadership of this country for too long has said, you're on your own. And you're either backwards or maybe just pathetic, but we don't have anything to say to you. And it is time for that to change. And the 2016 election represents, I believe, the people of this country from the middle of our society, the backbone of the country, standing up and saying, we want to be heard, we want to be respected, we want this country to stand for the principles it was founded on, and we're going to do something about it. And that's our challenge now. So I would just say to the political establishment of this town that, as another American senator once said, the world is changing. The old era is ending, and the old ways will not do. It's a new era that we must open now, the 21st century that we must actually begin, 19 years late. But heck, late is better than never. It's time to begin the 21st century, to actually focus on the problems of this era, the challenges of this day, to address the needs of this hour, so that our country can be renewed and strengthened for the century that is ahead. We need now a politics focused not on elite ambitions. We need a politics focused on renewing the strength of this country in the great middle of our society. We need a politics of national renewal. And building that politics, I suggest to you, is the great challenge of our era, and will be the great challenge of your era for the years that are to come. What might that look like? Well, it's time that we stood up to big government, to the people in government who think that they know better, government by experts, government by unelected administrators, government by unelected elites who are confident they know better than the American people, who are confident they know better than the Constitution, who are confident they should be in control rather than voters. It's time that we stood up and said, enough of that. It's also time we stood up and challenged this allegiance between big government and big business. You know, for too long, some of the biggest companies in this country, multinational corporations, the same people who have sent jobs overseas to China, who have been happy to invest in the Chinese market but won't invest in workers here in this country, who won't raise wages for workers here in this country, who are located in the United States, but would never say that they are an American company. For too long, too many of these companies have gotten too many handouts from government. You know, it's time we put an end to corporate welfare. It's time we put an end to crony capitalism. And it's time we challenge this allegiance between big government and big business. It needs to stop. Increasingly, the leaders of these multinational corporations, besides disrespecting our workers, failing to invest in our economy, then they want to come to us and tell us what our priorities ought to be as a nation. They want to tell us what we should believe on every social issue of the day. And their essential answer to us as conservatives is, just shut up about everything you believe and support us when we want tax breaks and other government giveaways. And I think our answer to them ought to be, no longer know how. We are for free competition in this country. We are for the free market. It is time that these big companies who have gotten insider deals from government were actually held accountable. And that begins, by the way, with big tech. Nobody has gotten more of a sweetheart deal from the federal government than the big technology companies. Facebook, Google, Twitter. They're treated differently than any other platforms or publishers in America. They're treated differently than any other company in America, and they've gotten rich and powerful and profitable because of it. And now what are they doing? Now they're saying that they should be able to decide whether or not conservatives get to speak on their platforms, what conservative speech is acceptable and what isn't. They now want to censor and sit in judgment on our political speech. You know, I saw a statistic the other day, it's actually a series of academic studies, that shows that Google in particular, the information flow that Google controls, do you know that a lot of undecided voters their primary source of information is from Google search. Maybe that's you. I'm sure you've used Google search and used it to find information. I do. Well, a lot of undecided voters, how do they get the news? They plug in key terms to Google search. But who did Google search favor in the 2016 election? I'll give you a hint. It wasn't Donald Trump. Google search overwhelmingly returned results in response to neutral search terms, overwhelmingly returned results for what? Hillary Clinton and the Clinton campaign. Google search overwhelmingly favored left-leaning and liberal news outlets and disfavored actively conservative-leaning and conservative and libertarian news outlets. They exercise enormous power over the information that we consume, over our channels of communication with each other, and yet their answer to us is, their statement to us is, we want to get all of government's benefits, we want to get all of the special privileges, and we don't want to be accountable at all. Well, I think it's time to stand up and say, that's not going to happen anymore. It's time that we held them accountable. It's time we stood up for the First Amendment, and it's time that we stopped censorship by these big companies and said that conservative speech is valuable speech, and conservatives ought to be able to speak in our society, openly, in public, and without reprisal. Same is true on our campuses, by the way. I know that this has got to be something that you face on your campuses all across America. College campuses are trying to regulate speech, trying to shut down speech that they disagree with. I mean, this is a kind of censorship that we haven't seen in this country in decades. Maybe we've never seen it in such a concerted form. And it's time that we as conservatives said that our speech and our views are just as valuable and just as legitimate as any other side. And you know what? We're committed to the First Amendment. It used to be, there was a time in this country when the left said that they were the great defenders of the First Amendment, and at least you could count on them if they disagreed with our views, at least you could count on them to defend our right to speak. I'm afraid that's not true anymore today, and I'm afraid you're experiencing it on your college campuses. And so it's time that we demand of these colleges and universities, especially those that receive federal money, taxpayer money, that they actually abide by the First Amendment, that they don't disfavor students who are conservatives or libertarians, that they don't disfavor students of faith, but they allow real and open and honest debate so that our constitutional values and principles can be expressed and enacted and go forward. And I want to say to you that you have such a vital role to play in this. Your courage, your willingness to challenge the status quo on campus, your willingness to engage in debate, to force tough conversations, to engage in new dialogue is absolutely vital. And if there's one thing I could say to you on this score, it is be of good courage. Don't be silenced. Don't stand down. Don't be intimidated. Because the future of this country quite literally depends on your willingness to stand up and to be heard and to make your views known. So keep after it. Keep doing it. The future of the country depends on you. Let me also say, give yourselves a round of applause. Politics focused on the great American middle, a politics focused on national renewal, also has to be serious about the challenges that we face abroad. And I'm thinking especially the challenge we face from China. I mean, let's be honest. China has for decades now stolen our jobs, spied on our people, ripped off our technologies. They've attempted to build their middle class on the backs of our middle class, and worse than that, they've attempted to build their military on the backs of the United States middle class. And I'm sorry to say, they've enjoyed some pretty fair success. And we are now facing a challenge from China that is going to be, I think, perhaps the greatest foreign policy challenge of the 21st century. It's not just a national security challenge, it's an economic challenge as well. And we need a policy in this country. We need a politics in this country that is focused on getting good paying jobs here, on returning investment here, on promoting worker productivity here, on getting better wages for our workers here, on actually building things in this country again and making things in this country again. We've got a problem if we live in a world where you have to get an expensive 4-year degree and maybe a graduate degree on top of that, just to get a decent job and be able to support a family. That's not a future that includes most Americans. That's not a future that will keep America strong. That's not a future that will allow us to compete with our foreign competitors and to triumph in the 21st century. And so we need to pursue policies that renew and strengthen the middle of our society and the heart of our economy. That means standing up to trade cheaters like China. It means stopping their attempts to manipulate our currency and theirs. It means bringing back jobs from overseas. It means creating new jobs in the places where Americans live, because you shouldn't have to move to a mega city somewhere in order to get a job on which you can support a family and build a community. These are the key challenges of this century, and they are the key challenges around which a new politics of national renewal must be built. I'll just say this to you in closing. The challenges that we face are very significant, and the politics of Washington, D.C. are very broken. But having said all that, I'm very optimistic. One of the reasons I'm optimistic is because of you, and because I'm from the middle of our country, in the middle of our society. I know the people who go to work every day and provide for their families and run those family businesses and volunteer in their churches and support our local schools and serve in the PTA. The people I suspect who raised you, the kind of people that you want to be. I know them. And I can say with total confidence that in the heart of our society, American strength has not failed. The American leadership class for too long has failed. The American political class for too long has failed. But the heart of American society has not failed. There is tremendous strength there. There is tremendous strength waiting to be called upon, waiting to be unleashed, waiting to be renewed. And that must be the focus and the aim and the goal of all that we do in the years ahead. I'll leave you with this from Winston Churchill, a hero of mine, who once said that if we open a conflict between the present and the past, we're liable to lose the future. The future now must be our great concern, because it's the future that we must fight and win. This country is asking for a better future. They voted for a better future in 2016. They voted for a better future in 2018. I think they're going to vote for a better future in 2020 when they re-elect Donald Trump as President of the United States. But the needs of our country is the calling of our time, and the needs of our country are the calling of your lives. The American people are saying we cannot go on as we have in the past. We cannot continue down the old paths. We must do something new. We must change our politics. We must change this town. We must renew this country, and your help is vital to that. I just want to say to you that I hope you will choose with your tremendous talents. I think of the talent in this room. I hope that you will choose to continue doing what you're doing now, which is to be engaged, and beyond that, to serve. Choose to serve in the places where you are. Choose to serve where you have opportunity. Choose to serve the people in the middle of our society who need a voice, who deserve representation, who need champions. And together, we can win the future of this country. Thank you so much for having me. God bless you.